Hello everyone. I am Alice of KHR Arts and Cloud Orchid Publishing, and today I am going to talk to y'all about my jam-packed weekend where I attended both the Hammond Public Library Author Fest and a LARP. So to begin, I spent this weekend with Neal F. Litherland, aka the Literary Mercenary. He is my partner and we both work as authors. And for this particular weekend, we had both signed up to vend at the Hammond Public Library Author Fest, which is a special event where all of the vendors are authors and librarians from not just the Hammond Public Library, but other local libraries come and shop for books to induct into the libraries. Of course, it's also open to the public, so there were people that came and bought our books as well, but it's just a very special event where you have the opportunity to have your books inducted into local libraries. And that's really important working as an author, to have your books inducted into local libraries and even not local libraries, because it helps support the library system as well as it helps you as an author, and it's just a really nice feather to put in your cap for your resume. I highly recommend make sure that you're checking out what events are going on with your local library and see what you can do to contribute, because the library system is a big part of the publishing industry and you as an author should definitely be investing your time or even possibly your money into it. So we had that this weekend, as well as we also had a LARP, which stands for Live Action Role-Playing Game. And so it's kind of like, think about Dungeons and Dragons and how you have the typical image of in your head of people sitting around a table and rolling dice with character sheets and playing pretend to go on an adventure. It's the same sort of thing, but instead of sitting around a table doing that, it's you're in a space with all the other players and oftentimes also dressed up, and you're actually physically moving around and physically interacting with each other, and it's just so much fun. I'm just having so much fun being a part of this LARP, making new friends, and of course it makes it a little bit easier for me because Neal is the storyteller, aka the game master. So that was not only in the same weekend, but both of those events took place on the same day, Saturday. So it was a lot, and normally we don't book events back to back like that because that is just so much time, energy, and effort in order to do something like that. It was extenuating circumstances where we had a scheduling error and accidentally scheduled both of those things on the same day, but thankfully, because the Author Fest went until 3 o'clock and then the LARP wasn't going to start until about 5 or 6 o'clock, we were able to make that window of time work. Even just doing a convention for the weekend, never mind trying to squeeze in a whole other event, it takes a lot of prior planning. And not only that, that planning for your packing. So as you can see, I'm doing a whole lot of packing here, and a big part of that is me planning out what are the things that I am going to wear that weekend, what are the costumes that I'm going to need to bring, and just all of the components that go into putting all of those outfits and costumes together. So planning those out in advance so that I know what I'm going to bring, so that when I'm packing, I'm not trying to figure out, oh, what am I going to wear? I'm figuring out, okay, what are all the things that I need for this outfit? So spending the week planning all of that out in advance is a lot of mental energy, but it's so worth it, so that when it comes to the day that you have to head out, you're not scrambling trying to figure out what you're doing. You already have a plan and you know what you need to pack, and so you can just go ahead and do it. And as you can see, I'm also packing my computer here, and a big part of that is because I've really gotten into doing these vlogs, and there's a lot that goes into doing that too, which is the logistics of making sure I bring all of the recording equipment, and then also bringing my computer, not because I really expect to get much work done with such a busy weekend, but more so that I need to be able to offload all of that footage several times during the weekend because the files are so big and the memory cards can only hold so much space. So making sure that I also have the logistics for working as as a YouTuber, having all of my equipment with me and making sure that I'm prepared, having enough batteries, and just all of that is a lot too. And then this is the physical aspect that I've talked about in some of my other videos, working as a convention vendor, especially my one about working at conventions, being somebody who has a chronic illness, is that I have fibromyalgia and I also have hip dysplasia. So doing all of this physical labor is really hard on my body. I'm lucky that I'm still very physically capable, but the thing of the matter is that more and more I'm having to depend on others to help me with a lot of this physical labor, because it just makes it so much harder than for me to function for the rest of the weekend. And that includes all of the physical labor once you're actually at the convention. But for the purpose of this vlog, I did do a lot of the packing myself, just to kind of illustrate just everything that goes into it. And when I mean everything, I mean everything. Oh, hauling up those books up those stairs is just awful, y'all. Those boxes are anywhere between about 20 to 50 pounds a piece, depending on how many books I have in each of them. And as I write more books, it's just only going to become heavier. And I have gotten really good at packing my car, and this is really important too, is that you can pack whatever you want, but if it doesn't fit in your vehicle, you're not really going to get anywhere. So being able to pack sensibly, where you're able to make everything fit in your vehicle and it's packed in a way that is going to make sense for the space that you're utilizing, as well as making sure that you're safe, that you don't just have random stuff flying around in your back seat and is potentially going to hit you in the head while you're driving if you have to brake really fast. So keeping all of that in mind with something as simple as packing the car can be a big challenge too. And I have over a decade of experience with this, probably closer to 15 years now, with not just doing all of my author events, but I've also worked conventions in the past for other things, and on top of it, doing my modeling tours. I have so much experience with essentially playing Tetris on advanced hard mode in order to get everything into my car. But as I'm writing more books and needing to pack more physical things, as well as being able to have enough space to transport Neal's stuff in addition to my stuff, I have been toying with the idea that in the near future, I am probably going to have to invest in a trailer hitch for my Jeep, that I'm just going to have a little trailer that I hitch up and put a lot of my stuff in there, because it's just becoming too much stuff, y'all. And you may be thinking the answer is bring less stuff, and the problem is at this point, I am bringing the least amount of stuff possible as it makes sense for what I'm trying to accomplish. So yeah, we're already kind of at a premium for making sure we're only bringing what we actually need to bring, which is a little bit of a scary thought here. For those of y'all who are wondering what exactly it is that I'm packing here, just all the different little bags and things, I do go into more detail in some of my other videos about working as a vendor at conventions, all the little detail things that I need to bring. But the gist of it is that there's just a lot of little things that you need to bring, such as tablecloths for your booth, and the little racks to put your books on, and just all of your little decorations and things like that. And then of course I have the things for me, like my clothes, my toiletries, my makeup, all that fun stuff. So it is just jam-packed. And for those of y'all that watch my channel and how much I harp on get a cart, I'm sure y'all saw my famous little blue cart in there. And Neal also has his own cart. So yeah, get a cart if you haven't already done so. They will just save you absolutely so much time and trouble. Now this is the other part of planning for an event like this, is taking into account travel time. Now I headed out Friday after I got done working my corporate job. What was nice was that we didn't have anything planned that we needed to do on Friday, so I could head out at a leisurely pace, not really have to worry about what time I was going to roll in at, and just have more of a leisurely evening before we were going to have all of the stress and running around that was going to be Saturday. And this is an important thing to put into your schedule, is making sure sure that you have plenty of time to be able to get on location, and also figuring out the logistics of where you're staying if it's not a one-day affair. I have done that in the past where I have packed up, gotten my costume on, gotten all my makeup done, rolled up to the event the day of, done the event, packed up, and gone home all in the same 24 hours. And let me tell y'all, that is exhausting. I've also done in the past where I've had a full weekend convention, and this was back before I could afford to get hotel rooms for things, and I would drive there and back for each day of the event, and that was just brutal and horrible. So if you really need to pinch your pennies, it is totally an option to do that, so long as obviously the event isn't too far away from where you live, or if you have a friend that lives close by you can stay with. But I don't recommend it. If you do have the funds, absolutely do splurge for a hotel room, or at least a hotel that's nearby, because it's just so exhausting to do that kind of drive. So I'm really glad that I have the option of being able to stay with Neal for the entirety of the weekend, since the Hammond Public Library is a hop, skip, and a jump from where he lives. And then of course the LARP was local, so we didn't have to go too far to do that either. And all of the logistics of that is important to take into consideration when you're doing events like this, because if it takes an hour to get on site, but you've only allotted yourself half an hour between all of the packing and getting on the road and just everything, you're going to be late and just add extra stress to yourself that you just don't need. So again, planning ahead to make all these things work is just such a big important part of the process that's really easy to forget about, or really easy to take for granted and shoot yourself in the foot with poor planning. I have also been using my GoPro as a dash cam, even for non-events, for when I'm just driving on the highway, whether it's to run errands or it's to go visit somebody or whatever. And a big part of that is that I noticed that in the past few years, people have just gotten way more aggressive in driving, and especially truck drivers have gotten way more aggressive and drive way faster than they used to. And to be perfectly honest, I don't always feel safe driving out on the road because people have just gotten so crazy. And what was really scary about driving out to these events for the weekend is that I did end up seeing several car accidents. One of them being a truck hit a motorcyclist. I mean, that is like worst case scenario there. I also utilize my GoPro as a dash cam, just even for when I'm out and about, just because it's that added level of safety, and that you're better able to prove what exactly happened if, God forbid, you get into a car accident. So yeah, especially in this day and age, I highly recommend, even if you're not like a YouTuber or a vlogger or anything like that, get a dash cam, even if it's just at least for when you're going on these long road trips to get to events, just for your personal safety. Unfortunately, I didn't get any footage of getting ready for the LARP or packing up and heading out and all of that. I also didn't get very many pictures or footage of the LARP itself. And a big part of that was because we were just so incredibly tired after the author event. And then on top of it, we were just in such a rush just to get ready and head out the door and also grab a bite to eat. So we didn't really think about it. I mean, honestly, recording footage was the last of our worries at that point. So unfortunately, I really don't have much footage at the end of the video of the LARP itself, but I did get some good pictures of myself in costume, and I did get a short little clip of me moving around in costume, so there's that. And as well as I felt uncomfortable with the idea of recording any footage at the actual LARP, because these are people who are there to just have fun. It's not really a YouTuber event or a big public event where people expect to be recorded and stuff like that. So I wanted to respect everyone's privacy, as well as not everyone feels comfortable being recorded, especially when playing pretend. So you probably won't really see any footage in the future of me participating at the LARP, but I am going to, in in the future try to do a better job of getting more footage and more pictures of me getting ready, getting in costume, and being in costume by myself and things like that, but not of the actual event itself. For those of y'all who may be wondering what exactly the LARP was that we were playing a World of Darkness Changeling LARP, and this is definitely an ongoing long campaign style LARP that we are going to be doing. And my personal character, I have named her Étoile, which is French for stars, and she is a unicorn changeling. So she's not even humanoid. She, in the hedge, is a real horse unicorn all the time. She's very offended when people call her a person or refer to her as people, and that's a big part of my character's arc, is becoming more okay with becoming a person. And there's so much fun and shenanigans with that, especially because she got taken to the hedge back in the 1950s. So I get to have a lot of really ridiculous, silly fun with not understanding how technology works and things like that. And a big play with that is also my friend Chris, who is a mutual friend of mine and Neal's. I met Chris through Neal, and Chris is playing as a goblin, essentially, like a cottagecore, cute little halfling goblin. And we hang out together in what we call our glade, our hollow in the hedge. And neither of us really likes leaving the hedge, but we're often forced by others to leave the hedge so that we can collect glamour and go on adventures and have shenanigans and things. But both of us really don't have interest in the outside world, and neither of us understand technology because Chris's character, Moss, was taken in the 1960s. So both of our characters have a lot of similarities, which is a big part of what makes the game so much fun, is we're able to kind of set up a lot of these jokes and just keep the game really fun and lighthearted, especially because in the near future there's going to be a lot more combat situations, a lot more serious situations. Chris and I have kind of set ourselves up to be the comic relief, as well as because I do have issues with my fibromyalgia. There will be times when I won't be able to make game because of that, or I just have a scheduling conflict. Both of us have also set ourselves up to be potential NPC characters, where the players will be able to interact with our characters even if we're not present at the LARP, in order for people to still be able to fulfill their missions and to be able to go into battle and things like that. Specifically, both of us are going to be working in the healing department. We're both kind of going to be healers or clerics, I guess, as you might want to categorize it. Étoile is going to deal very much in creating potions and salves and powders and just all that kind of alchemy stuff that people need. And then Moss is going to be utilizing baking little treats and creating foods and beverages that also heal and have other effects. And this all ties back into our hollow, the glade, in that we do a lot of farming with goblin fruit and other foods and other plants there. And we also go into the oubliette in order to get more seeds and plants and things in order to expand our garden and our farming. And so all of that makes it so that our characters don't have to engage in combat, especially because this is not a, as they call it, a boffer LARP or even a combat LARP, which boffer LARPs are, you've probably seen them at conventions. They walk around with the very padded armor and the padded sword. And then there's the combat LARPs where they actually use real armor and live steel to physically fight each other. This is not that kind of LARP. There are a lot of people that have a lot of different disabilities and just are differently abled, and it just would not be a good idea for people to engage in physical combat, as well as the space is just not set up for that. It's way too small. It's at somebody's house. We would end up breaking things. So it's very much a, if combat comes into play, it's going to be high pretend, less physical activity. But even so, because of the big chance that I'm not going to be able to make games regularly, I don't want to hold up anybody's missions or anybody's storylines just because I can't physically be there. So that's a big part of why I set it up that way. But I am having a lot of fun getting into this, as well as this is me also working on trying to be more social. I have throughout my life always struggled with being social and going out of my way to spend time with people rather than being holed up working on my writing and my art. And this is a great way for me to do it because it's a safe space with people that aren't going to judge me, that are just as weird as I am, people that enjoy getting in costume and playing pretend and all that, as well as there are people that I already know and am friends with who are there, so that it makes it easier for me to make new friends and to build on those friendships and get to know people. So this is a big part of a longer goal that I have for myself, is that I am very much trying to integrate myself back into post-pandemic society and getting more comfortable being around groups of people and things, but I'm still very much having trouble with being in close proximity to people, touching people, interacting with people, and of course being around large groups of people. So this is kind of a stepping stone for me in order to reach that larger goal of being able to do big events again, like going to nightclubs or going to concerts or going to mega cons like ACEN or Dragon Con or Gen Con or things like that. We are definitely nowhere near being psychologically or physically capable of doing those things yet, but we're getting there. And I am so grateful to my partner Neal, who is so much a part of a lot of these events and shenanigans that I do, and that he helps me both physically and emotionally with a lot of this stuff. With my growing disability, it really helps that he is absolutely capable and willing to help me to physically schlep books and other heavy things around at conventions and helping me with breakdown and setup, and also with him just making sure that I'm doing okay and taking care of me and things like that. So I'm just so grateful for him being there for me and being available and capable of doing that kind of stuff. It's not as one-sided as it may seem. There's definitely a lot that I contribute to us doing these events as well. I'm just very much giving him kudos here for the contributions that he does that specifically benefit me. I oftentimes pick up the tab a lot with things planning wise and financially, and going out of my way to find events for us to be able to participate in so that he can also build his brand and sell his books. So we very much have a symbiotic relationship as authors working these conventions, in that we both have our strengths and weaknesses, and when you put those together, we make a really awesome team. And I have talked about that in some of my past videos, that it's really important to have a support system with working as an author in this industry, especially if you're going to be on a convention circuit on a regular basis. Being able to have somebody to go with you, whether as a personal assistant or even just as a buddy, just to help you keep your sanity together, it makes a huge difference. And it is absolutely possible to do it all by yourself. It just makes it a lot easier if you do have that support system there with you. Another aspect of these conventions that's really important to keep in mind with planning out what conventions you want to attend and events that you want to put on your circuit is knowing the benefits of what you get out of those events. And of course, you're not going to know that until you go to an event and see how it's potentially going to benefit you. And that's why the first year after I got published, I went to as many events and conventions as possible so that I could see which ones worked for me and which ones didn't. But there are some things on the surface level that you can know before attending an event, such as this event being an event specifically for authors to get their books inducted into libraries. Being able to be a part of events like that, where you know that no matter how many sales you make, you are at the end of the day still going to get something out of the event, is a really important bar to set with what events and conventions you're willing to take that risk with. Because it is a risk. Even if it's a free event where you don't have to pay for a badge, you don't have to pay for a table fee, you don't have to pay for a hotel, all of that, chances are you're probably still paying for gas and wear and tear on your vehicle in order to get to and from those events. And you're also spending your time and your energy in order to do them. It's the idea of, if you do events that are not beneficial to you, that's time that you could have spent doing a different event, or even not doing an event at all and either working on your writing, or at the very least just spending time with friends or living your life or resting. So it's very important to plan out not just the what events that you're doing, but also the why. And so even though we didn't have a lot of sales at the Hammond Public Library event, getting our books inducted into the public library and being able to contribute to our local library was benefit enough. Getting sales on top of that is just kind of icing on the cake at that point. Of course, the main reason why we go to events is that we do want to make those book sales. I mean, we all have bills to pay. However, you also want to make sure that there are other benefits baked into the events that you go to. Another benefit that's really crucial at events and conventions is speaking on panels. So a lot of times small events like this library event won't have panels or workshops or events for you to be able to participate in, but a lot of the larger events and conventions will. So even if you don't make very many sales or even any sales, being able to participate on panels and participating in workshops and events and being able to put yourself out there and build your brand is a really important benefit to attending those events and those conventions. And even with that, you want to make sure that those events and conventions are going to be your audience, because being seen and participating at conventions that have nothing to do with you or your books or what you're trying to accomplish is also not very helpful. And I also learned that doing events and conventions that first year, learning a lot of what works and what doesn't work. And don't be afraid to take risks. I'm not saying to avoid taking risks. I'm just saying be smart about which ones you want to take and make sure the ratio of events that you know are a sure thing is significantly higher than the events that are more of a wild card. To give y'all an example, my first year of selling my books, there was a series of wild card events that I went to that I thought either this is going to be a flop or it's going to be really awesome. And unfortunately, that particular industry was a flop for me. And that was specifically the toy conventions. So these were conventions that were specifically for people who like collectibles, such as like Star Wars figurines and Funko Pops and just other types of collectible toys like that people buy and trade and all of that. I have found that those conventions, you typically don't do very well as an author. Most of the time, the people at those events are more interested in buying toys and not so much books. And even if you do have sci-fi books, you're still probably not going to sell enough books for the experience to really be worth it. So just a little warning tidbit there from my personal experience. But I'm glad that I did do those events because it was worth looking into and seeing, hey, this may or may not work. And there have been other events where I was very surprised at how successful the event was for me, even though it seemed like it might have nothing to do with books and the likelihood of me being able to sell any books would be very low. And one of those was a local vintage fair type event. It was an outdoor fair where people had a lot of homemade things like candles and cute little tchotchkes and decorations for your house and things like that. And I actually did really well at that event and sold a lot of poetry books and art books. So absolutely don't be afraid to take those risks, because you never know what surprises you may find in events that really work for you and your books. And as I talked about earlier, it's really important to figure out the logistics of your schedule for doing a big weekend like this. And a big part of that for me, since even if I wasn't doing a LARP, I still dress up in costume whenever I do events and conventions. That's a big part of my brand. And as you can see here, being able to have the time and the wherewithal to be able to sit down and do my makeup and then get dressed and all of that for the event does take up a big chunk of time. It can take anywhere from an hour to 4 hours for me to be able to complete this entire process. And that all depends on how complicated the makeup is and how complicated the costume is, and if there's anything else that I need to do in order to get all of this completed for the look. And thankfully, this was a fairly simple look, even though it does look magnificent in person and does look really complex. The actual logistics of doing the unicorn look that I did for the LARP, the only complicated part is doing the rainbow drips under my eyes. But other than that, it's actually really basic makeup. One of the examples of my far more complex makeup is when I did my mermaid look for Worldcon. That did take me a full 2 hours to complete that look. But what I did here in order to just make everything run smoother and to take less time is this is the look that I do for the LARP as a toile. Is this very ethereal rainbow makeup look, as well as I'm just having a lot of fun here because it's also Pride Month, and that's where I kind of got the idea for wanting to do the rainbow drips on the eyes for étoile. And I wore, I guess you could say, like half of my étoile costume to the convention. So I wore the dress, I wore the makeup, I wore the wig and all of that, but I didn't wear a lot of the accessories or the cape or the unicorn horn headdress because I needed to be able to still freely move around for load in and set up and breakdown and load out. And then also I have found that there is a certain line between being eye-catching enough that people want to approach you and want to approach your booth and being a distraction where your costume is so crazy and so epic that people just come to your booth to take pictures of you, to take pictures with you, and then they don't pay any attention at all to what's actually at your booth, and they just take pictures and then leave. And so wearing all of that with the cape and the unicorn horn and everything definitely would have crossed that line where people would have just come to the booth demanding pictures and not actually cared about looking at my book. And as well as I said, the logistics of being able to do load in and load out and all that would have just been way too hard in all of that. But having all of this done ahead of time and then just putting on those extra elements once we got to the LARP made planning all of this just so much easier, so that I wasn't doing two completely different looks for these two events on that day. And when we returned home to be able to get ready for the LARP, essentially all we had to do was I had already set aside a bag that had all the things that I needed for the LARP. We just grabbed the bag, Neal grabbed his bag with his LARP stuff, and then we all got in the car, got some takeout from a drive-thru, and ate in the car while driving to the LARP so that then we could arrive, put on the last touches to our costumes, and then get ready to play. And again, all of that took all of that advanced planning to be able to make time to put those looks together, knowing how much that I was going to wear for the event and then how much I was going to have to take with me later to the LARP, and all of that took a lot of additional planning, not just ahead of this weekend, but also on Saturday morning, making sure that we were taking the correct bags at the correct times and making sure that we had everything that we needed for the event and then later on for the LARP. Because let me tell y'all, there is nothing that sucks more than realizing once you get to an event that you have forgotten an important item or even an entire bag of important items, and you absolutely don't have time to go back and get it. So absolutely making sure that you take the time to plan out those kind of logistics is really going to save you a lot of hassle and probably a lot lot of time as well. And driving out to the public library, thankfully, was very short because it's very close by to where Neal lives. So that meant that we didn't have a super long travel time to and from the event. And then also the fact that it was a smaller event, we didn't have as large of a booth to put together, also made a lot of all of the logistics for this, for timing, easier as well. Even though I did bring about 80% of the things that I normally bring to an event, the way that the booth was set up means that we have less of it to actually physically set up. And what this means is the biggest thing that I bring to the events that does not need to change regardless of the size of the event is bringing all of the bins of books. This never changes no matter how big or small the event is that I do. All of the other components don't take up as much room in the car, and how big or small the event is depends on whether or not I bring those things. And as you may notice, I did pack 3 tables, and I ended up not needing to bring these in, but I did have them just in case, because in the past with doing some of the events at Hammond, I have decided to take down the table that they give us and do a little bit of a different modular setup with my own personal tables. But at this one, they did have larger tables available, and also the area that we were positioned in, because they did give us the freedom this time to be able to pick whichever table that we wanted to set up at. So having all of that at our disposal made it so that I didn't need to bring out those tables, so they did stay in the car. But at other events, sometimes they won't provide you with a table or chairs, and you do have to bring those. So sometimes I do have to bring the whole kit and caboodle. But in this case, it's just so much easier, no matter the size of the event, to bring all of the book boxes and not to meter them out of, oh, I only need to bring 5 of each book to this event rather than all of them because it's smaller, because the amount of time and effort it takes to unpack all of them and then repack them for each individual event is just absolutely not worth it. For me anyway. And a big part of that is because I have so many books and so many titles that it doesn't make sense for me to do. Whereas if you only have a handful of book titles, it probably does make more sense to be a bit more judicious with how many books you bring to each event. But in this setup, we had a much more simplified setup than we do at the larger conventions because we only had the 1 table of space. Whereas at some events, I have so many as 4 tables of space, or even a 10 by 10 booth space. And so for those, obviously those setups take a lot more time and effort to put together. But for this one, we had the 1 table. So really, the majority of the time that we spent with figuring out the setup for this was trying to figure out how to display all of our books in such a small amount of space without the space feeling overcrowded, and making it easy for people to be able to pick up the books and look at them without feeling like they were going to make a mess. Because I have seen some setups that people do that look really visually impressive, but the problem is that because they're so complicated that it feels like if you try to pick up one of the books to look at them, that the entire setup is going to fall apart and that you're going to be knocking books over. And something like that is going to deter people from wanting to interact with your books and potentially even lose out on sales because people are afraid to pick up your books and look at them to buy them. So absolutely, when you're doing setup, making sure that it's visually stunning is important, but making sure that it's easy for the guests at the event to be able to interact with your booth and pick up your books is far more important. And this is coming from me, aka Etoile, whose catchphrase is aesthetic or death. So absolutely make sure that when you're organizing your setup that it's easy to interact with. And so that's a lot of what this fiddling around was just figuring out where we wanted to put everything in a way where it's visually pleasing to look at, but also easy for people to be able to pick up the books, take a look at them, set them down without worrying about messing up the setup, and also making sure that all of the books are visible. And that can be a challenge with having this many titles walls and just having so many books on the table is giving fair visual space to as many of them as possible. So that is also something that I have been having to experiment as of late, because I just have so many titles now that I'm having to get more creative with how I display my books at booth setups in order to make sure that they're all seen. Because if I bring 30 different titles to an event, there's no way that I can sell them if nobody can see half of them. So that is definitely a challenge that I have been experimenting with and dealing with, and it's definitely a good problem to have. I was really excited that this was officially the first public event that I did featuring my new novel, Succumb to Darkness, and I also got to bring out my new banner to advertise Succumb to Darkness. I'm just so proud of how it turned out, and I'm just so proud of this book, and I'm really glad that the new novel got a lot of positive attention, and I even got a few sales, and it was one of my books that was inducted into the library. So just really glad that Succumb to Darkness is off to a good start, and I'm really looking forward to the book tour that Succumb to Darkness is going to be on in the UK in July. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. The book tour is where my book has been sent out to several book bloggers in the UK, as well as there are several on the book tour that are here in the United States, and they are going to feature my book on their book blogs and their social media and stuff. So I can't wait to see what their thoughts are about the book and how they decide to feature it on their platforms. So that's going to be a really fun treat. Having my new book at this event, even though it's a small event, it was really nice to be able to get it out there and finally get it seen after a full month of it being published and out on the market. So seeing how people react to it in person and seeing what people think of it in person is a really different experience than how it's received online, because a lot of that you don't really see online. Just a lot of that behind the scenes, seeing what people think of it, having people interact with you and talk to you about it and all that. So it was just really exciting to be able to see that. I'm also learning a lot with doing these events now with my official YouTube channel and incorporating these into my vlogging experience, and just basically adding on the logistics of recording and later on editing the footage for y'all. And I'm learning a lot, and I'm having a lot of fun with how all of this works, as well as I'm really grateful to my friends Brian and Maria of the Maria and Brian Travel Channel. They've been helping me a lot with growing my YouTube channel, as well as helping me with new ideas on how to record things and how to edit things, and also with watching their channel to see how exactly they do vlogging with when they travel and go on their adventures, and how I can incorporate that in how I handle doing the recordings for my events and conventions. And so this is something that I hope that I can continue to grow in the future, because even if it is for just the very selfish purpose of I love looking back on these events that I do and seeing how much fun that I had, and also learning from them as an author and how I can continue to improve and make my future events and conventions run even smoother and do even better. So I'm just really having a lot of fun learning, doing all these events, and also growing as a YouTuber. And of course, I hope that y'all are enjoying this experience along with me. We're all here, we're learning together, and I hope that y'all are having fun on this journey with me. As a small side note, at this particular event, mine and Neal's books also looked disproportionate due to that his books got reassigned to a new publisher due to the head of the publishing company he was previously published under passed away. So he had to find a new home for the rights to his books, which he did recently. And one of his novels, The Old Soldiers, is actually on pre-sale right now. He's been showing off the cover art. It looks fantastic, and I highly recommend that y'all check it out. And because he's had to rehome several of his novels, they weren't available at the convention for sale, but he was able to advertise them with the pre-sales for people to check them out later after the event. So that is also something that we will be able to improve upon at our next event, is that by then his books will be officially out and available for sale, and he'll be able to get inventory, and our halves of the booth will be able to look far more proportionate with both his books and my books, because Neal does have 6 different novels now published, as well as he has a lot of work with writing his tabletop gaming guides and books and supplements. So he does have just as much work published and out there as I do. He just didn't have all of it available in person for this particular event, so it did look a little bit disproportionate, but that also does just sometimes happen at events. And we are working on a better way to be able to distinguish our 2 halves of the booth visually, so that is also something that we're going to be improving upon in the future, is just figuring out some visuals with the booth, since we do so many events together. And that's an important part of branding, especially if you're doing conventions with another author, is just figuring out how you want to split up the booth and how you want to change everything with the visuals in order to differentiate your books from their books and make it easier for potential customers to sort through all of the books. It's particularly overwhelming, of course, at our booth, because together we just have so much work, but I think that's also part of our brand and what makes us so recognizable at events. Of course, we have the obligatory load out, which is just always so much more chaotic than load in, because at this point it's just pack everything up, we'll worry about it later, just get it in the car, as well as especially because we had to load out and get packed up as fast as possible so that we could get back to his house and drop everything off and then get everything together for the LARP. So we were really crushed for time here. Whereas typically after an event like this, we aren't in as much of a hurry. I mean, when you do load out, they usually give you a time limit of when you're supposed to be out of there, but in this case this was definitely crunch for time, and we were in very much more of a hurry than we normally would be. After an event like this, we would typically find somewhere to go out to eat, and then whether it's go back to the hotel room or go back to his place or go back to my place or wherever it is that we're at, and just take some time to relax is what typically happens after these events. But instead we headed off directly to a magical LARP where Neal was storyteller and I was Atoile, the magical unicorn, and we had an absolute blast, but we definitely spent all of Sunday recovering and sleeping in and just doing a whole lot of nothing. So I hope y'all enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to give it a like. And if you're new, subscribe. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye bye.